You guys asked me tons of questions about the zombies storyline, so in today's video I took the time to answer 48 of them. Let's get to those questions. Is Misty Dempsey's daughter? Ever since Misty was introduced to the storyline, the zombies community thought that she was Tank Dempsey's daughter. Why would they have thought that? Well, number one, when Dempsey gets the M16 on Moon, he says, "I'm gonna buy one for my 5-year-old. Number two, she talks like he does. For example, she calls zombies meat sacks and slackjaw. Number three, her dad was a Marine just like Dempsey. And number four, in Tagder Toten, Misty said this.
That headshot was for you, Daddy. Hoorah!
Thanks for trolling us, Treyarch. Anywho, the answer is no. Hoorah is a common phrase between Marines, and if Tank really had a child, he or she was most likely born in the 40s, before he was captured. That would mean Misty would have been in her 90s in transit. Maybe she's got some anti-aging cream that nobody knows about? Why are there zombie monkeys in Ascension? In the 1960s, the space race was in full swing and the Ascension group was sending monkeys on lunar landers into the upper atmosphere to see how long they'd survive. On November 6th, 1963, the Ultimus crew showed up from Kino, and it just so happened that at the same time, the lunar landers that took the monkeys up started falling out of orbit. But why are they zombified? There's no definite answer to that. However, I had a theory that the monkeys were being injected with 115 at Ascension. How were Nova Crawlers made? Man, hearing those things as a kid was pretty frightening. Anyway, to answer your question, the crawlers are a combination of pig DNA, humans, and Nova gas. Since they first showed up in Kino, it's very likely that Group 935 created them. Because they look similar to Keepers, BOA theorized that 935 tried to make their own Keeper after spotting one. This makes sense because a cipher from Drak reads, "We have discovered that there are beings that can travel between dimensions without the aid of teleporters." How does the loop work when Primus gets sent to the Afterplace? You're talking about when Primus gets sent back to the Great War, right? Well, whenever Dr. Minty Fresh sends the crew back through the cycle, their victory during the Great War becomes the end of that cycle, and then they disappear from history until they meet again at Origins in 1918. If you want to fill in the blanks, it sounds like Primus dies, then kind of reincarnates with no memory of the previous loop. Is Shangri-La based off the lost city of Shambhala? The location might be, but I think the story is based off the fictional novel Lost Horizon by James Hilton. The story of Brock and Gary follows a similar plot to Lost Horizons. For example, in BO3 Zombies, after Primus broke the universe because of their dimension hopping, Brock and Gary lost control of their plane and found themselves in the Himalayas near Shangri-La. They didn't land there on purpose like they did in Black Ops 1. In Lost Horizon, the characters also crash-landed in the Himalayas and found temples in the exact same place called Shangri-La. The survivors of that plane crash also happened to be British and American, just like Brock and Gary. Speaking of Shang, who invented the baby gun? In Shang, when Richtofen gets the gun, he says,
"I knew Maxis was working on such a device, but I had no idea he was successful."
So that means that the inventor of the baby gun is Maxis. Are the witches from Buried Samantha Maxis? If not, who are they? That would be the ghost of Jebediah Brown's mom. How she became that way is actually pretty funny. Jeb and his mom lived in a mining town called Purgatory Point, which we know as the map Buried. Element 115 was first discovered in one of the mines there, but that blue rock has certain zombifying properties. A miner named Clive Farnsworth was down in one of the mines for 10 days and came back with his eyes glowing red. As any zombie would, he walked over to where there was people and came across Jeb's house first. His mom went out to meet Farnsworth, and unfortunately, he ripped her throat out. The next day, Jeb went into the mines to figure out what was going on down there. 5 days later, he came back up thinking he was only down there for a few hours. The night before Jeb left, he had a vision of 2 angels who told him to build a machine that he thought was an oven or a kiln. This became the Pack-a-Punch, and man was it the talk of the town. People were coming from all over to get their guns papped. On July 20th, 1885, Jeb got drunk and stumbled down to the cemetery to pay his respects to his mom. He dug her up and put her corpse in the Pack-a-Punch machine. Whoosh, she disappeared into thin air. When Jeb got back home, he found a younger version of his mom floating around the house. Legend has it that her ghost still plays the piano to this day. How is Porter? As in Porter's X2 ray gun? Well, he's very dead. But if you're asking who Porter is, he's the inventor of the papped versions of the ray gun and ray gun Mark II. Who made Pack-a-Punch? Good ol' Uncle Jeb. How do the mystery boxes work in Zombies canon? So usually, whoever is in control of the ether at any moment in time decides where and when the box gets sent. For example, in Black Ops 1, Samantha was in control through the MPD, so she was the one who moved the box around. Also, the reason there are weapons from different times in it is because it is infused with element 115. In Origins, Dr. Maxis found that when 115 is brought near the ancient stones, it starts pulling things from other times and dimensions into their reality. So, he theorized that 115 has something to do with the box having futuristic weapons in it. How were the jumpy zombies from Transit made? Oh, the denizens? Did I scare ya? Anywho, here's their story. Broken Arrow was created in 1963 in response to the zombie outbreak at the Pentagon. During the Cold War, Broken Arrow was playing around with the elemental shard and made a couple different creatures they called bios. But as you can see, the experiments went very, very wrong. The facility where all that went down was abandoned and the research was divided between other Broken Arrow facilities in the US. One of those facilities happened to be Hanford. Clearly, experimentation continued because on April 10th, 2023, they created the denizens. Since those ugly little things are only found in transit, it's safe to assume that they were made in the labs there. By the way, did you know that in the Black Ops 2 game files, the denizens were called screechers? I think that name fits a lot better because that's the sound they make. Why is there a teddy bear in the mystery box? That is Samantha Maxis' teddy bear. She's pictured with it, we see it in her room when we teleport there from Kino, and you can hear her voice when the teddy bear appears in the box. But even after she is no longer in the MPD, the teddy bear still appears. That's because the teddy bear is an omen of bad luck. And that makes sense, the mystery box is based around luck. So I guess when the teddy bear appears, it means you're out of luck. What do the different zombie eye colors mean across different maps? The zombies' eye colors usually tell you who's controlling them at that moment in time. This isn't always true though. So the yellow eyes mean Samantha is in control, the orange eyes mean Dr. Maxis is, blue is Dr. Richtofen, red is the Shadow Man, and white is Cornelius Purnell, aka the Avogadro. Tell us the story of the Mexican and his spleen. Alright, gather round children. This is the tale of the Mexican and his spleen. There once was a Mexican spy named Pablo Marinus who was captured at Griffin Castle by Group 935. There, they kept him prisoner and pumped his veins full of 115. As 935 was performing these experiments, Pablo had visions of being a knight and fighting in a great battle against demon-like creatures. This great battle he's referring to is the Great War. He goes on to say, at one point, it appears I am doomed, trapped in the tentacles of a great three-headed beast. When suddenly, 4 knights decimate it with magical elemental staves, saving me from certain death. Sometime later, Group 935 transferred him to Siberia where he would undergo more experiments carried out by Richtofen. He, along with Takio and Nikolai, became one of Richtofen's first test subjects in his mind control experiments. Unfortunately, Richtofen killed him while performing an operation where he removed Pablo's spleen. Fun fact, did you know a monkey tried to steal Pablo's spleen from Richtofen?
Drop that! My spleen!
There's more to Pablo's story, but let's save that for a character video. What did Beware of the Six mean in Kino? People used to think it was mentioning the dog rounds since they usually show up on round 6, and because Fluffy is test subject number 6. However, this could also mean the Nova 6 crawlers. Here's why. First, the Nova 6 crawlers first appeared in Kino der Toten, and second, 6 is in the name, Nova 6. There never was any explanation or any intel about that warning, so all we can do is theorize. Tell us about the Shadow Man's origin to present day. In the beginning of the Ether story, when there were just the Keepers and the Ether, 2 Keepers called Monty and the Shadow Man used to be best buds. I'll let Monty explain the rest.
I knew a bloke, and I'm talking way, way, way back. He was the sweetest, most charming individual you could ever wish to meet. He was funny too. We used to have such a good old laugh together. Honestly, my sides hurt thinking about it. He was my friend. He was my best friend. And then the Apothicons got hold of him. Since then, he's pretty much acted as their agent, zipping around the galaxy.
Again, I don't want to give you too much information because I do want to save his story for a dedicated character video. What is Russman's backstory? Before Russman met the rest of the Victus crew in transit, he was an employee at Broken Arrow. During the Cold War, he was working at a facility where Broken Arrow was testing the elemental shard on animals. The results of these tests were these creatures called bios. On June 4th, 1986, one of the bios escaped its containment and began killing the employees. Luckily, Russman escaped. Next time we hear about him is on July 6, 2025, when he and George Barkley went to Camp Edward to send a sample of the Avogadro to Hanford, Washington. Bear in mind that they didn't actually send the Avogadro to Hanford, just a sample. That part doesn't happen till Ultimus and Primus arrive later. Anywho, when the outbreak happened later that year, Broken Arrow was dissolved and Russman was out of a job, forced to walk the earth homeless. Then he stole the transit bus, met Stuhlinger, and they both met Marlton and Misty at the diner. Who made the ray gun? That would be Dr. Maxis. This next one was probably the most asked question I've gotten, but who is the Panzer? Thanks to Pablo Marinus' diary, Element 115 was discovered at the Origins dig site in France in 1917. But pickaxes and shovels weren't gonna cut it, if they wanted to go deep enough to find the blue stuff. Come on guys, this isn't Minecraft. So Richtofen came up with a plan to make robotic suits. He ended up building 2 different suits, one for digging and one to protect Group 935. The Panzer for digging is the one in Origins. The suit meant for protection is the one that was in Der Eisendrache. The Panzer suit for digging was successful and Richtofen decided to mass produce it. But who's inside? Just random soldiers that got infected while using the suit to pull up 115 from the dig site? What's the story behind Dempsey's girlfriend? Her name is Phoebe. After McCain was kind of put back together inside an ADAM unit in Alpha Omega, Ultimus Dempsey wanted to verify it really was Peter McCain. Dempsey says,
Okay, let's keep it cryptic. Me and Phoebe. Sum it up in 3 words. I forgive you.
To me, it sounds like McCain was in love with a girl named Phoebe and Dempsey got her instead. Why and how are there weapon outlines on the walls? So when Maxis had Primus open a portal to Agartha and Origins, it kind of caused rifts to open up across the multiverse. Apparently that causes things to be really screwy in the universe, and as a result, Dr. Monty felt the need to step in. But to allow humanity to keep their free will, he would give a nudge here and there across time and space. The chalk drawings, perk machines, gumball machines, mystery box, and the power-ups were all his ideas. Why did the zombies' eye colors change in Nuketown on round 25? The zombies' eyes go from yellow to blue on round 25 because Nuketown takes place at the same time that Richtofen switches bodies with Samantha on the moon. Who's in the Nuketown bunker and why is he there? The who is Marlton, and here's the why. On April 10th, 1965, Broken Arrow made robots called ADAM units that were meant to help people with tasks like everyday house chores, raising a child, tax preparation, and etc. I definitely wouldn't let any one of those things come near my child. Anyway, there was a problem with these robots. Broken Arrow was using the elemental shard to charge them, and that caused them to feel emotions and become self-aware. When Broken Arrow realized this, they started deploying the robots as soldiers in war. This was a project they called Project Toy Soldier. Since the robots felt emotions, they also felt fear. They didn't want to die. So they revolted against their inventors. 60 years later, in 2025, Marlton found out about this through some internet forums and snuck into Camp Edward to investigate and hopefully expose the program. The mannequins turned on him and he locked himself in the bunker. In what order should I play the games to get the full chronological story? The games are in order, it's just that some of the maps aren't. I'm talking about Classified, Shadows, Mob of the Dead, and Blood of the Dead. I found this Reddit post by Golem III that lists out all the maps in chronological order. Pause the video if you need to. I always wondered this, who made the monkey bomb? You have good old Ricky Toffin to thank for those. They're made of real monkeys who were stuffed right as they died. Who invented Juggernog? Group 935 did, but Dr. Monty nudged them to make perks like Juggernog, Quick Revive, and Speed Cola. Wasn't Sam's dog pregnant when it was teleported? Yes, sir. Before Fluffy became a test subject, Dr. Maxis gave her to Samantha and warned her to be careful with the dog because she's gonna have puppies. That's why the dogs keep on coming. Who was the first person to discover Element 115? In the undocumented dimension, it would be whoever was the first to discover it in the mines at Purgatory Point in the late 1800s. In the documented dimension, I guess Pablo found it first since he was the only one to write about it back in the 1300s. What's the story behind Leroy? Everybody calls that big guy from Buried Leroy. I have no clue how that started, but I guess his overalls make him look like a Leroy. His real name is Arthur, and he served the Wolf King during the Great War, back in the 13th century. Arthur buried the Wolf King's bones at Castle Der Eisendrache, the same bones that are used to get the wolf bow. After burying the bones, Arthur was teleported to Buried due to temporal rifts. Element 115 tends to mess with things in that way. What's the story behind the guy in the Black Ops 1 menu? There's no backstory, it was just something cool to have in the start menu, and I really wish Treyarch would go back to giving us cool little details like that. How does Dr. Monty die? Dr. Monty never actually died. When Primus Nikolai destroyed the summoning key at the end of Tagter Toten, Dr. Monty and Agartha were plunged into the Dark Ether. So there could be a chance that he's still alive in the Dark Ether, but just very twisted and might not even be recognizable anymore. Give me your opinion of the zombies YouTuber Tim Hansen. Tim Hansen seems like a really great guy, and he's actually one of my inspirations for starting a zombies channel, along with Noah and Lex. They're all great people, great YouTubers, and maybe someday I'll get a chance to record with them. Who made the first zombie? Zombies were always around since 115 was discovered. Clive Farnsworth was the first recorded zombie. He interacted with the 115 that was found in the mines at Purgatory Point and killed the Pap inventor's mom. But the first zombie made by human hands was made by Dr. Maxis at Derice. Why was Group 935 created? To study 115 and improve the human condition, but we all know how that ended. Is Zombies Chronicles a different timeline? Nah, it was just for nostalgia. However, there is a possibility that Chronicles was in a fractured timeline. Nacht and Verrucht have radios where Monty describes what went down at each of those locations. At the end of them, Monty says,
"You weren't there either, but then you were."
Do with that what you will, but I'm sticking with it was just for nostalgia. What are the least fun and most fun wonder weapons? The wonder weapon that's the least fun to use is the Ray Gun Mark I. It's just not fun to get it anymore, and sure, it felt amazing to get the ray gun in World at War and Black Ops 1 because it was new and rare, but now it just won't die. The wonder weapons I had the most fun with, and I said weapons with an S because 3 of them are tied in my mind, are the Shrink Ray, Thundergun, and Sliquifier. I picked these 3 because they made me laugh every time I used them. Take the 3179 JGB 215 for example. The fact that you can kick zombies? What? And the sound they made the kicking 10 times better. Moving on to the Thundergun, when I first played with it, making zombies ragdoll through the air made my 14-year-old self giggle every time I pulled the trigger. Same case with the Sliquifier, it's just so funny to use. What's your favorite map and character in zombies? My favorite map has to be Buried. The Ray Gun Mark II was introduced, being able to do the chalk outlines was awesome, and that witch in Jeb Brown's house, or should I say his mom, she gave me chills every time I saw her. To this day, the hairs on the back of my neck stand straight up when I enter that house. My favorite character though has to be Ultimus Takio. His quotes in Kino, even though they were meant to be humorous, seemed very wise. Who was Samantha's mom? I don't really know because there's no info on her, but what I do know is that she died giving birth to Samantha. Can you please do the story of Town and Farm? Sure. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful sunny town in Hanford, Washington called Town. And let me tell you, this town was beautiful. That was, until the moon rockets hit. Now it's become the wasteland that you see today in transit. Same thing happened with Farm. What's an MPD? MPD stands for Moon Pyramid Device. How ironic. The Corrupted Keepers, later known as the Apothicons, made the MPD a long time ago when they knew they were going to lose the war against their Keeper brethren. It gives whoever is in it control over the zombies, the mystery box, and the drops. Richtofen teleported to the moon by accident while testing his teleporter in 1940. The MPD was there and he touched it, resulting in him going mad with the voices of the Apothicons, including the Shadowmans. Who are the Illuminati? What is their purpose in the story and when were they mentioned? Ever heard this sound and seen this symbol? Well, actually that sound is from X-Files, but this is how people usually present it. They're a secret organization that people supposedly believe controls the media, the world's governments, and money. Before Ultimus Richtofen joined Group 935, he was actually in the Illuminati. Then Dr. Maxis invited him to join Group 935, but he only said yes because he was acting on behalf of the Illuminati. But after losing his mind in 1940, he renounced his membership in the order. They weren't mentioned much, but you can find their symbols and coded messages in maps like Verrucht, Kino, 5, and even Ascension. They even helped Primus Richtofen build the lab under Alcatraz. In the Firebase Z Easter egg, why did Maxis have Monte's scarf and Takio's sword? So there was speculation that when Sam was in the Dark Ether, she was able to summon that stuff to help her survive in there. But there isn't any proof or intel of any of that. So the only answer I can give you is that Treyarch was just teasing us with that. How was the Thundergun made? I definitely can't tell you about the science behind it, but I can tell you how the Russians got their hands on it and who made it. So the story goes that when World War II ended, Group 935 disbanded. The scientists were left without jobs, and most of the facilities were overrun by zombies. Richtofen, being the benevolent person that he is, split 935's gadgets and scientists between Russia and America. One of the things the Russians got was a blueprint for the Thunder Gun, and Gersh was the scientist responsible for building it at Ascension. What's the difference between the ether and dark ether? The ether is basically everything above creation. It's a place that can't be detected or sensed. Monty mentioned in a wisp on Revelations that it isn't a place people go to when they die, and it's definitely not a place meant for humans. Now, the dark ether is the opposite. It's a dark energy below creation that corrupts and gobbles up everything it touches. Basically like the Upside Down from Stranger Things. It's responsible for corrupting a handful of keepers and turning them into apothecons, and it's also where element 115 comes from. What happened in Noctur on Toten? So Noctur's is a peculiar case because there wasn't an official crew yet and the characters didn't have names. But here's what went down. On the fateful summer night of June 4th, 1945, 4 unnamed Allied soldiers were flying back to base when their plane stalled over an abandoned airfield. The plane crashed into some Nazi trucks that were delivering element 115 and zombies to a Group 935 facility. Possibly Darice. Anywho, the soldiers in that plane survived the crash, but unfortunately, so did the zombies. They held out for as long as they could until the airfield was overrun. Through the fog, the soldiers saw a nearby bunker and ran into it hoping they could survive the night. Out of nowhere, weapons started appearing on the walls. Was some unseen entity looking out for them? Or was this part of some twisted game? Regardless, they didn't survive for very long. Who made the bows in Dryzen Track? So there's no intel, radio, or cipher that explains who made the bows, but we can guess. Johnny J25 pointed out that there are a lot of black sun symbols and other things relating to the keepers around the area where the upgrade rituals are done. This could indicate that the bow was made by the keepers, and the name of the bow, Wrath of the Ancients, could be a reference to Primus, because in Origins, Samantha refers to Primus as the Ancients. So maybe that means the keepers made the bows for Primus to use. How did Victus get to Blood of the Dead? At the end of Buried, we discovered that Victus activated all 3 pylons in Maxis' favor, one in Transit, one in Die Rise, and the last one in Buried. But they were bamboozled. Maxis said that they were helping him heal the Earth from the destruction of the moon rockets, but really, he just wanted to open the gateway to Agartha. He opened the gateway, and in turn, the Earth was destroyed. He also went back in time to 2025 and pulled Samantha out of Richtofen's body and put Richtofen's soul in a zombie. Now Victus was left to roam the Earth on their own and undead Richtofen kept chasing them. Why, you may ask? That's because undead Richtofen was tasked by Primus Richtofen with getting Victus's blood. Sometime later, Primus Richtofen sent Victus on a quest to find the Chronorium. So he opened up a rift for the crew, teleporting them to a place called Base Zero, in a dimension that was known as the Empty Earth. But in order to have access to the base, their blood samples needed to be collected. So they hopped in some strange machine and let it take their blood. Then once inside the base, the Victus crew collected the Chronorium and took another rift to the lab under Alcatraz. When they got there, Primus Richtofen was there to greet Victus, with arms open wide. Victus gave him the book, and then he asked them, "Do you want to live?" That's definitely not a strange question. Of course, their answer was yes, but they didn't fully trust him. So Richtofen was like, "I got some errands to run, but you make your decision, and when I get back, tell me what you want to do." The rift took Richtofen to the Empty Earth, where he met up with undead Richtofen, who handed him the blood vials of Victus. Then, Primus Richtofen time traveled to Alcatraz when the Mob of the Dead crew was there, got their blood samples, and gave 2 of those vials to his past self in Origins. When he got back, he asked Victus if they made a decision. They decided that they did want to live, but not in a constant state of running and trying to survive. So he offered to keep them in stasis until the quote-unquote final world arrives. The crew climbed in, and then we get the Blood of the Dead cutscene. However, the Blood of the Dead cutscene is in a broken cycle, and the comic shows what happened in Blood during the normal cycle. The comic says Primus arrived right on time, and in Blood of the Dead, Richtofen says, "You're late." Who is the astronaut on the moon? The astronaut on the moon is actually one of 5 human test subjects that Dr. Schuster sent to Griffin Station in 1963. His name is Private Hastings. In 1945, after Group 935 broke up and the scientists disappeared, Richtofen cut a deal with the Soviets and Americans, handing 935 scientists and their research over to both countries. Schuster was sent to the Americans and worked on teleportation for them at the Pentagon. He made a teleporter for them that was able to send people from the Pentagon to Groom Lake. But Richtofen told the Americans and Soviets about Griffin Station back in 1945. So, of course, they wanted to go to the moon. So the Americans tasked Schuster with creating a teleporter that would take them to Griffin Station. However, the teleporter was difficult to control. If the calculations weren't correct, a person would end up on the moon, but too far into the future. Schuster did his last test trial on August 3rd, 1963, the date when he put Private Hastings on the teleporter platform. He knew that Private Hastings was sent to the future when communication couldn't be established. So the astronaut is most likely Private Hastings as a zombie. Because, you know, the whole 115 turns everyone into zombies thing.